Hey, welcome to 12 Tone. We're doing another Q&A this week, and joining me to ask the questions is Anais from Jar Curiosity.
Hey folks!
We've got a lot to get through, so let's get started.
Kaylor Hodges asked, would you consider textures and such, like in your recent video, to be a part of music theory?
Absolutely, yes. I find that there's a tendency to think of theory as just about harmonies, melodies, and maybe rhythms, but I don't think that's accurate. The point of theory is to understand the structures that make music sound and feel the way it does, and which structures those are depends on what kind of music you're looking at. I think the focus on harmony and melody comes in part from jazz theory. Jazz has what are called standards, which are popular songs that lots of different bands and musicians play. They play them so differently, though, that the only real consistent identity they have is their melody and, to a lesser extent, their harmony, so that's what jazz theorists focus on. Everything else is viewed as part of the arrangement, not the composition itself. But not all musical cultures play so fast and loose with what a song is. Many, including modern popular music, view things like instrumentation, textures, and even audio effects like reverb or delay as important structural elements, which makes them a part of theory in those contexts. Next question.
Dave Davidson asked, what do you think composers do when they get writer's block?
It depends on the composer. I don't tend to write with super strict deadlines, so I usually have the space to just walk away for a bit and come back to the problem with fresh ears after I've gotten some more sleep or something. Another option is reference materials. Go listen to something similar to what you're trying to do to get yourself more in that headspace. Don't just copy it, of course, but giving yourself the right mental prompts can help to push you over those roadblocks by reminding you what you like about that sort of music in the first place. Or you could just go improvise for a bit. You may not use anything you come up with there, but it's a good way to get ideas flowing. What's next?
Eduardo Talenti asked, is the way we perceive emotion in music built in our brain, or is it just the result of our cultural development?
I think it's a mix of both, but there's definitely a lot of cultural influence which can sometimes be hard for theorists to accept. We put a lot of work into building these mathematical models that perfectly explain how things work, and we like to believe that we're uncovering some deep objective truth, but in reality, for pretty much every assumption we make about how music works, some culture out there has developed a musical tradition without it. And that honestly makes sense. Artistic experience is way too subjective for there to be some absolute fundamental model that captures everything, no matter how refined it might be. Next.
Cogito asked, if a person had never heard music before, what would you play for them? Good question.
Yeah, this is a hard one. The most obvious answer is to just play them my favorite songs, but I have no reason to believe they'd understand or appreciate them. Like I mentioned before, music is really subjective and cultural, and if they've never heard it before, then I can't predict how they'd react to things like harmony, melody, or rhythm. But if they've ever heard words, then I have one tool left. Lyrics. I'd probably pick a song with great lyrics, something that tells a powerful story and also uses its musical elements to support that story, and for me, that means something by Jackson Browne. Probably Song for Adam, which, if you've never heard, you should go listen to. Moving on.
Jason Black asked, from a music theory perspective, why is Nyan Cat so earwormy?
I mean, I could probably do a whole video on this at some point, but briefly, it's just fast and high, which gives it a lot of energy. Even the lower end parts are mixed so that they sound pretty bright, which might seem weird because we're taught to balance the different frequency ranges, but really committing to the high end makes it seem relentlessly cheery, which is what it's going for, and the constant onslaught of notes helps keep that momentum going. The two different sections also help. Whenever you start to get sick of one, the other jumps in and takes you to a new place. The second section sits a bit lower in range than the first, which gives you a little time to rest. Oh, and it's also got some cool melodic features. It's in B major, but it's full of D naturals, the flat third. Next.
Grant Hurst asked, if you could have everyone in the world read one book, fiction or non-fiction, which would it be?
I suppose I should list some music book, because that's kinda my thing, but instead I'm gonna go with Small Gods by Terry Pratchett. I mean, I'd recommend everything from Discworld, but you said one book and Small Gods is the best. Next question.
Olivia Anderson asked, what are your thoughts on musical fractals?
I think they're really cool. For those of you who don't know, this is a thing Adam Neely's talked about a couple times where he takes a MIDI recording of a melody and then speeds it up really fast to the point where it just sounds like a single note, then uses that to recreate the melody out of itself. It's a fascinating idea and a great illustration of the relationship between rhythm and pitch. Practically speaking though, I don't think it's all that useful. It doesn't sound good and I don't know how to fix that without losing the original concept. But anyone who knows me knows that I couldn't care less about the practical applications of my theoretical toys, and this is no exception. Next question.
Vincenzo Frozzolone asked, what are your favourite things to do outside of 12-tone and music in general?
Games mostly. I play a lot of video games. I also play board games when I get the chance, although my regular play group doesn't really get together that often. Outside of games, I really like running, and coming back to games, I also designed them as a hobby, although I'd never gotten anything to the point where I could publish it. Maybe I will someday. Speaking of which, Next question.
Cobblefrog Games asked, how does video game music impact play experiences?
In roughly the same way that film underscoring affects the experience of a movie. The music can create or release tension and help set the mood on top of which the story is told. It's one of those things that you don't really think about a lot of the time unless it's going wrong, but to understand how impactful it can be, imagine playing Dark Souls, but with the Super Mario Bros. Theme. Good game music tells you how to feel about the events that you're playing through. I think it's trickier than film music though, because what the characters do isn't fixed. Your music can't rely on timing cues because you don't know exactly when the player's going to attack. You also don't know how long your song will be playing for, which means you need to build in loops, and you have to think about ways to avoid letting that become repetitive and boring. If you want to learn more about game music though, I highly recommend the channel 8-Bit Music Theory. They're really good and they know a lot more about this stuff than I do. Next.
Zach asked, what do you think the future holds for music careers?
Yikes. I'll be honest, I'm not optimistic. Well, I am in a way, but also... Okay, here's the thing. We're living through the rise of large-scale automation, and at this point, I have no idea what the future holds for the concept of careers in general. I suspect that the music jobs that exist will last a little longer than many others, because what we do is harder for computers to learn, but that doesn't make them safe, because entertainment industries don't scale well. If you take a population and double its size, it suddenly needs twice as much food, water, shelter, and lots of other things, but it doesn't need twice as many songs. The new people can just listen to the same stuff as the old ones. You might see some new artists pop up due to increased market segmentation, but nowhere near what you'd need to support twice as large a music industry. So as other jobs become less and less available, more people are going to be flocking to entertainment, and we just don't have the space for them. Plus, computers are taking over a lot of our work too, just a little more slowly. That's not to say don't get into music. Nowhere else is safe either. Just be careful. Next question.
Tom Finer asked, is there any set range for what kind of songs or compositions you're thinking about analysing?
Well, yes and no. It's not set in stone, but I do have a general process. First off, to be clear, I don't really look at suggestions that aren't from our Patreon patrons. This isn't out of spite or greed, it's because we get so many that I need some filtration system, and Patreon seems like a reasonable one. Trust me, I'd love to analyze every song that gets requested, but I'm only human and there's only so many hours in a day. Even Patreon gives me way too many suggestions to work with. My current list of patron requests is at 44 different songs, and it's always growing. So how do I pick from that? Honestly, it's mostly gut feeling. I'm looking for songs I like because it's way easier to get into an analysis if I already enjoy the song, and I'm also looking for things that are well known and popular. There's definitely a bias towards rock, because that's who I am, and also because I think it's underserved by theorists. We tend to talk about jazz and classical a lot, but the harmony of rock and pop songs can be just as complex and interesting, and it deserves to be recognized. Next.
Quinn Lanahan asked, do you know of any resources for making non-12 tet music?
I do. The Zen Harmonic Wiki is fantastic, or XN Harmonic, I'm not sure. Either way, it's my go-to source for anything microtonal. It can get pretty dry and technical, and it has its own terminology that can be hard to follow at first, but it's just got so much great information, and all those terms have their own pages with explanations, so it shouldn't be too inaccessible. Okay, one last question.
Tree asked, how did you come up with a little 12-tone symbol with a treble and bass clef?
I didn't. That's the work of our original animator, Emmanuel, who worked with us for the first 6 months before moving on to other things. Emmanuel was awesome, and he had a huge impact on the visual aesthetic of the channel. The elephants are his design too. In fact, you can still see his hand in this video. Literally, if you rewatch the intro, that's Emmanuel's hand, not mine, which for those of you wondering is why it's a right hand when I clearly favor my left. Anyway, that's it for questions. Thanks to Anais for helping us out. She runs an awesome science channel called Draw Curiosity, where she dives into all sorts of topics like chemistry, biology, and math. She's also a PhD student studying insect flight and an all-around wonderful person, so really, go check her out. And while you're checking things out, I recently recorded a podcast with Friedemann from Holistic Songwriting. We talked about music theory and composition, and it was a blast. We're planning to do some more, so if that sounds interesting, there's links to that and Anais's channel in the description. Thanks to everyone for the questions, and thanks to you for watching. If you want early warning for the next Q&A, our Patreon patrons get notified first, and we also collected questions on Twitter, Facebook, and through our mailing list, so follow us on any of those platforms, check out our store, and keep on rockin'.